The Roaring Twenties, the pinnacle of progressivism. The progressivists viewed alcohol as a source of violence, but in fact, in outlawing it in the 18th Amendment caused an uproar of gang activity. Bootleggers single-handedly overtook Chicago. It is also depicted in F. Scott Fitzgerald's book, The Great Gatsby, where Gatsby is supposedly a bootlegger. It is also depicted in several television and films such as The Roaring Twenties, released in 1939, the television show The Simpsons in the episode Homer vs. the 18th Amendment. Even in children's cartoons we see examples of how Al Capone has greatly influenced the Chicago crime syndicate.
There, Chicago, Illinois. Have I ever told you how I cleaned out the Chicago racketeers?
Oh, the Roaring Twenties, Commander?
Precisely. The police felt that they could break up the racketeers if I could bring in the leader, Al Baloney. I agreed. So I decided to pose as a vacuum cleaner salesman. Knowing that Al Baloney was always well guarded, I armed myself carefully. Snub-nosed pistol, snub-nosed machine gun, and snub-nosed cannon. I made my way to the house of Al Baloney and demanded an opportunity to demonstrate my vacuum cleaner. But I failed to consider that I might be searched. When I stood before the cruel Al Baloney, I was completely disarmed.
Terrible, Commander. Did you give up?
Never! I whipped out my vacuum cleaner, flipped on the switch. Al Baloney was sucked right into the vacuum cleaner. Then I closed the case on Al Baloney and delivered him to the police.
You actually cleaned up Chicago with a vacuum cleaner?
Why?
In the classic movie The Warriors, which was released in 1979, it is all about how Cyrus, the leader of one gang, has a plan to bring all gangs together to stop inter-gang violence. But Cyrus gets shot because of an irate thought of an individual whose life revolved around violence. All gangs coming together would end violence altogether.
Can you count, suckers? I say the future is ours. If you can count. Look what we have here before us. We've got the Saracens sitting next to the Jones Street Boys. We've got the Moon Runners right by the Van Cortlandt Rangers. Nobody is wasting nobody. That is a miracle. And miracles is the way things ought to be.
Now, while that was a great idea, it didn't last for very long. In 1973, the Glock 17 was introduced. In 1986, the Glock 22 was introduced. Then 4 years later, in 1990, the Glock 23 was introduced into the community and became one of the most widely spread firearms and most accessible in the city. Death tolls for Chicago between 1990 and 2007 are as followed. And as we see from this diagram above, the main homicides are in the Latin King and gang areas. This is why 90% of all murders in Chicago were performed by gangs. What brought on this increase in homicide is the introduction of newer technology and newer capabilities for gang members to commit these acts of crime. St. Valentine's Day Massacre was one of the most known about because it was such a horrific event and so well planned out
that it was impossible to pin Al Capone for this crime. The cars they used in drive-bys in the 20s had limited space, speed, and maneuverability, therefore causing much death and destruction. While these were a favorite of Al Capone, they did not work well with his crime syndicate. Again, the Chicago typewriter, Al Capone's most used weapon. The Glock is one of the most used weapons in gang violence. What stems from the Glock are what we call submachine guns, such as a Tech 9 or a Mag 10. This newer technology promotes rapid fire and more accessible weapons. These weapons also become significantly more dangerous and more accessible to the public. Between old gangs and new gangs are three things: new cars, new weapons, and newer things to bootleg.